Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Corey, better known as the Seaman, and I want to welcome you to another edition of the Seaman's Cinema Sit Down as I continue on my little post-COVID catch-up party that we've been having the last few days. I tell you, if you guys don't like tons of videos flooding your timelines, I apologize. I just am trying to get myself caught up on all the things that I wanted to talk about that I wasn't able to after quarantining for 2 weeks. And, some of those things are things I watched and had to wait to feel good enough to sit down and talk. Some of those were trailers that I just held on to because I couldn't do that. Some things we had to go out to the movie theater for that I wasn't able to do because of quarantine. The last film we just talked about was one of those movies, The Green Knight. Really, really dug that movie. David Lowery produces a slow burn that, for me, just was excellent. Dev Patel crushes this thing. If you want to know all my thoughts and feelings about The Green Knight, you can check them out right up there. But now we shift gears and head over to the world of animation and Netflix and Mr. Kevin Smith. Oh, this is a very divisive show online. I've been following. You're stuck on your couch or in your bed, resting and recouping. I do a lot of Twitter strolling. And I go through all of my nerd stuff. And there's been some interesting conversations around this show. Some that I understand, some that I think go a little too far, and some that I completely agree with. What am I talking about? Why don't you pull up a chair? Take a seat. We're getting ready to dive in spoiler-free and maybe a little spoilery. I don't know if I'm going to talk any spoilers or not this review, but I might. I don't know. We'll see what happens as we go. But if we hit there, I will certainly talk about them. But we're going to try to go spoiler-free into Masters of the Universe Revelation. And as I said, this has been a pretty divisive show in the online community, and I should probably make sure that you can read Masters of the Universe up on the screen. Yeah, this was not something that I expected to get as much backlash as it did, but due to a couple of YouTubers who maybe just were looking for something to attack Kevin Smith on, or just are uncomfortable about a world that's about progression more so now, and I understand some things kind of feel forced upon us in the world of media, but that's how you get to change, and I think some of these people maybe are scared that white male stories are disappearing. I don't know. But there has been a strong, loud contingent online about this show being a bait and switch and not a He-Man show. And the first thing that I will say to that is, this is part 1 of a season. The season is 10 episodes, and we're just seeing the first part of that, the first 5 episodes. So I think there's still a lot of story to be told, and I think the story that's being told is very He-Man-centric, and we'll see that in part 2. But what I will say is that it is 100% not a bait and switch, and it's not going to be a bait and switch. And if anything, I would say that the story choices that Kevin Smith and his team have made for this show are the types of story choices that I think diehard He-Man fans should have wanted to have seen for this character. I am not one of those people. I did not grow up with the He-Man toys. That was a little bit before I was born. Didn't really watch the show a lot. Definitely caught it, was aware of who He-Man and Skeletor was. But Ninja Turtles, Batman, that was my realm. Not so much this. But when I heard Kevin Smith was going to be doing this show, I'm a huge Kevin Smith fan. I was like, I got to get in on He-Man. I bought the only 2 seasons from Filmation on Amazon, and have watched a good chunk of them. And I think that the story that they're telling falls completely in line with all the characters and is a story that is so worthy of He-Man. The choices that they make, I understand some of the gripes, and if you're just upset that He-Man is kind of absent or sidelined through a lot of this first part of the season, I get where you're coming from, and I even felt that a little bit. But I do think that the story that they're telling is not a bait and switch story. It is just one of these epic hero stories that are worthy for a character like He-Man. So I want to just get that right out the way, because I don't think that the people who keep saying that this is a bait and switch, where basically they're saying Teela is going to become He-Man, it's nonsense. That's not what's happening in this first part. That's not what's happening in the overall story. If you listen to Smith talk at all, in as least spoiler of a way he's been able to do it, he's made it very clear that that's the case. And if you watch this first part and have listened to the things that he said, I can completely see where this is going, and I'm super, super excited about part 2. I think He-Man fans are going to be blown away when they get what they get in part 2. Now, that being said, I enjoyed Masters of the Universe Revelation. I think the writing is very good. As I said, I think the story is worthy of He-Man. And I also think the writing is nuanced. It does really wonderful things. And the story they're crafting, like I said, what they're setting up for the second part, which was not Kevin Smith's decision. That was a Netflix thing. I think Kevin Smith has even said he would have preferred if all 10 came out at once, but that didn't happen. We got it in 2 parts. But I think that the story that they're telling, they're doing some really cool things. And the thing that I think most He-Man fans were looking forward to with this series was seeing a character that they loved when they were growing up come to life in a more adult, mature manner. And I think the team nails that stuff. However, I don't think it's a perfect first part of a season. And I don't think it's the perfect beginning for this universe. I was a little taken aback by the decision that they make in the first episode that sidelines, spoilers, both He-Man and Skeletor for a good chunk of this first 5 episodes. I was taken aback by it. They make other choices that involve characters that I was also kind of like, well, interesting. However, like, if you have ever watched anything in this type of realm, things are going to change from what they currently are. But I thought it was a very, very bold and interesting choice to start the show where they start the show. And the reason I think that it's a problem is simply because there are He-Man fans who were let down with this first part. And this show shouldn't have let down any He-Man fans because, like I said, I think it's quite good. And what they've set up is really, really cool and interesting. And is a very adult-oriented story that is worthy for the character of He-Man. However, I probably would have approached this a little bit differently. If you wanted the perfect first part of the story that they're telling, I think I would have opened with just a one-off, quick, maybe like 10-minute little He-Man adventure, give everybody exactly what they've been waiting for. You know, you have a lot of people who are diehards of this character that have been waiting a very long time for him to come back. I think we should have spent 10 minutes with He-Man kicking ass, like have him take on Trapjaw or just like a random villain, and give us that right at the top. Then do what you do with the first episode. I think if you extend the first episode by like 10 minutes and just give us a He-Man little adventure at the start, you could go into the story that they're telling that surrounds, the ceremony with Teela, what's going on with Skeletor and his master plot. I think all of that would have worked if you had 10 minutes up at the top. The other thing that I think would have made this work more, and specifically work more for people who were looking for something that was going to be He-Man oriented, would have been to split the second episode between He-Man, Prince Adam, and Teela. You get a full-on, all-out Teela episode in episode number 2, and that's not different from what the original series did. I think episode 6 gives you Teela's whole backstory in the original show. So I have no issue with Teela getting an episode inside of here to help further her story, or even the fact that she kind of carries a good portion of the first part. I don't have any issue with that because it makes sense, like I said, to the characters and to the world. And as long as you're doing that and you're being faithful to what it came from, I'm cool with what they're setting up because, like I said, I think it's going to pay off big time at the end. However, you could have given us a little time in that second episode with He-Man / Prince Adam, because things that we learn later in the first in the back couple episodes clues you into something that I thought was very, very interesting for the character. And I think you could have spent some time in that place with that character, just kind of establishing what happened, some of the decisions that he makes himself, and why he's being sidelined. And I think if you would have given that a little bit of room to breathe in the second episode, and then did what you did in the back, I think this would have been a slam dunk home run. Like if you would have just given like 10 minutes of He-Man at the top, and given He-Man and Prince Adam a portion of the story about where he is and what's going on in that second episode, and then do everything exactly the same, I think this first part hits in a big bad way where everybody would have been satisfied, and then sets you up for the second part, which, like I said, I think is going to blow everybody away. So if I have any critiques on the show, it's that. I think what happened in the world of social media and around this show with some of the fans who've been very vocally against it, you could have avoided. And that would be my biggest knock on it. And even as somebody who thinks that it was a good first part, it didn't quite hit the home run I was looking for, because two characters that you're very invested in, the two characters that you were coming here for, do get sidelined for a good portion of this first part of the series. And like I said, some of the things that they do with the characters, while I think it works in the course of an epic like they're telling, it's just a little strange for that to be the first thing. I almost think this season that they're building out would have worked better as like season 2 or 3. But as we know, you don't know if you're going to get to have a season 2 or 3. So if you have a story that really hits, tell it right up front. I just think you could have tweaked some things to make it hit better for everybody. Now, that being said, there are tons of things in this show that I really like. I think that Kevin Smith and his writing team, as I said, tell a very nuanced, sophisticated adult story that is very befitting the character of He-Man. And it's the type of hero story that he deserves. And like I said, I'm fascinated to see where they go with it. But I think the thing that they nail across the board is this universe. All of the characters feel right. Like I said, not being a He-Man fan, I was doing my homework before this show started. And watching this, it does feel like a natural continuation from the 1980s show. And considering that the last episode of the Filmation series did not feature Skeletor or Evil Lyn or Beastman or any of the main villains. It was like this random one-off story with the snake people that exist in Eternia. I like that you're telling this kind of story for both He-Man and Skeletor. I think it's very, very interesting for both characters. And I'm excited about where they're taking it, because it's that adult look that you're looking for in this world, and all of these characters just feel right. He-Man and Prince Adam feels on the money. Cringer, Man-at-Arms, Teela, the Sorceress, Orko, like, all of the villains, Evil Lyn, Beastman, Merman, like, everything feels right. And the things that happen in the show all make sense in how people react or what they do. And I think telling this story allows you to explore some interesting areas of Eternia. And I like that they did that stuff. I like that we kind of finally get to see Skeletor pull off something. You know, his plans don't typically go correct, and I'm sure by the end of the whole season, which is supposed to, you know, essentially be like one super long episode of Masters of the Universe, it probably won't work out for Skeletor, but to see him kind of accomplish something for once was kind of cool. And we also get some answers on the secrets behind Castle Grayskull, and I thought that world building and that mythology addition was really rich and really interesting, and something that I think really, really worked. And then, like I said, like the characters just all hit, and like they all feel the way that they're supposed to feel and look the way they're supposed to look, and the stories that they give these characters, I just thought hit for all of them. And gave all of the actors wonderful opportunities for wonderful performances. But the other thing that I just really dig about the show before we get to that cast is the animation. The animation is stellar. I think you probably could have had a little bit more action in this first 5 episodes, considering that the animation studios that Netflix works with, we've seen better looking action than what we got here. But the animation across the board is just gorgeous. It's so gorgeous. And for this group of characters in this universe, like, is mind-blowing how good this thing looks. So I love the animation. And the other thing, too, and this isn't necessarily stuff that I picked up on, a couple of them, but I've watched some videos that have gone deep diving, and, like, the Easter eggs that are in this show for He-Man fans, I don't understand how any He-Man fan could ultimately be upset or be worried that, like, Kevin Smith is going to do something to destroy your childhood. There is so many nods to the toy lines and to storylines and things from the original show littered through this entire thing that is wonderful. And if you're a nostalgia whore like myself, or a big fan of, like, callbacks and nods to things that exist from like the graphic animation that came with like the toys and like some of the images that were never in the show's animation but around the show from like a promotional standpoint, like some of that imagery is in here. Just there's so many cool He-Man things throughout this whole thing that I'm surprised that there weren't more people that were like, it didn't do what I wanted, but like, there was some cool freaking stuff in here. Like, I don't think this is a show that warrants all-out praise or an all-out, crush. Like, it's something that falls in the middle. And the fact that people couldn't relate to that when there's this type of Easter eggs that are in this show, that was a little disappointing to see in the online community as well. But all that said, I think what Kevin Smith has ultimately done is really quite good. And like I said, they set up the actors for wonderful things. From a voice standpoint, Chris Wood, I think he knocks it out the ballpark. He sounds and looks, not looks, but sounds and feels exactly like he should for both He-Man and Prince Adam. And I thought he does a wonderful job with the little bit that he has in this first part. And I'm excited to see what he does in the second part. Sarah Michelle Gellar as Teela, I'm not going to lie, did not work initially for me. Having watched a lot of the original show, she just didn't sound like Teela, but over the course of the 5 episodes, she 100% becomes Teela, and I am in love with what Sarah Michelle Gellar is doing for that character. And what they've done for the character in general. Yes, Teela has a large story presence in this first part, but again, it feels like it's appropriate for the character, and Sarah Michelle Gellar is able to give you a really good performance, and the stuff that goes into Teela's story is all stuff that's warranted. When what happens, the way she responds is right on, and I just think Gellar gives a voice that ends up working for the story they ultimately are telling with Teela, which again is not a bait and switch. If you are paying attention, if they're setting up anything for Teela that's not just Teela being Teela, is not becoming He-Man. There is another thing that they could be setting up if you understand the source material that I think is probably where they're going, if they're going to go that route at all. But yeah, I think the Teela stuff works, and I'm excited to see what we get with that character with where we're left at the end, because it's a pretty big cliffhanger when we get to the end of this thing. But I think Sarah Michelle Gellar does a great job. Lena Headey also really good as Evil Lynn. Again, didn't hit initially for me because it was like, oh, it's Lena Headey. But over the course of watching the show and getting used to not hearing what I've been hearing from the 80s show for so long, I think she really hits. Liam Cunningham, who voices Man-at-Arms, fantastic. Like, going out and getting Davos from Game of Thrones was a perfect casting for that character. And I dug what they did with Man-at-Arms. Like, there's some interesting stuff there. I wish we could have dove in a little bit more. One of the other things that's kind of lacking in this first part is, like, a strong male presence. And I think we could have gotten that a little bit more out of Man-at-Arms had we tweaked his story a little. But I think Cunningham does an excellent job. And also, Evil Lynn, when we're talking about her, interesting, like really interesting stuff, but I thought it was stuff that ended up ultimately working. And again, like kind of positions the character where you see stuff you're not always familiar with, but makes sense in the context of what's happening. And then by the time you get to the end, like everything just, I think, hits perfectly for her. Stephen Root, who voices Cringer, great job. I really enjoy Stephen Root in general, and I thought what he did with Cringer worked quite well for what they had going on. And then of the main group, I think the only other person that's kind of being left out right now is Orko himself, voiced by Griffin Newman. He does a stellar job. I really think he crushes this, and the emotional weight that he brings to Orko, and the story beats that they give Orko. The Orko stuff in this show, I think, works the best. And it's the stuff that gets you emotionally invested and brings the heart. He's clearly the heart of the show, and I think Griffin Newman just does an excellent job. I saw him interviewed where he was talking about how like the original voice was just the guy doing a performance, and then they threw it through a bunch of filters to get it to sound like Orko. So like him trying to discover that correct voice, like the work he put into it, it's just one of these moments where like you know that the actor cares a lot about this character, this show, and this world means something to him. I mean, he's a real He-Man fan, and I think what he does for Orko is awesome, and it's what they do in general for Orko. If you are a fan of Orko, you're gonna be very happy. If you thought Orko was stupid, I think you might change your tune, and a lot of that goes into the performance that Griffin Newman does. He has a lot of emotional weight, and he is the heart of the show, and I thought he just absolutely crushed it. and everybody else that litters this thing. Whether it's Dennis Haysbert, who I won't say what character he is. It's a bit of a surprise, but when you find out, dude, was that so cool. Like, so freaking cool. And like, I just thought he crushed with what he was doing. Somebody, and just like the characters that pop up. I mean, Kevin Michael Richardson does a great job with Beastman. I liked what they were doing with Beastman's character and how it played into that plotline and tied into Evelyn's story. Thought that stuff was really good. Henry Rollins crushes the Triclops stuff, and the combo of Triclops and Trapjaw, who's voiced by Diedrich Bader, who also crushes. What an interesting story development. Like, that stuff was fascinating. Like, it's one of those where, like, man, if we had like a 24 episode season or something like that, like, we could have really dove into that stuff, and that would have been like just really cool piece of lore to add. And again, allowed two of your actors in Rollins and Bader to really have stellar performances that necessarily wouldn't have been expected from those characters. So I loved all of that stuff. And then of course you have Mark Hamill as Skeletor, and I love Mark Hamill. I mean, Luke Skywalker, he's a phenomenal voice actor. This one didn't quite work for me. I think he does some interesting things at times with Skeletor's voice that I did think worked, but I thought tonally he was a little too low in his octaves. I thought Skeletor needed to be a little bit higher, a little bit more tingy, and ultimately the voice is clearly being pulled from the Joker realm to a point where, yes, it is different, but it is so similar to the Joker that Skeletor kind of took me out of it multiple times throughout the course of the show, and it ended up being one of those things where it's like, Skeletor being sidelined for as long as he wasn't a bad thing, because I didn't get pulled out of the show when he showed up. I was really excited to see what Hamill would do, and if I'm being completely honest, little lackluster for me. Just because it's too close to the Joker, and when he hits those ranges, I'm just hearing and I'm seeing the Joker. I'm not hearing and seeing Skeletor. So that was a little disappointing for me. But overall, I think he does a good enough job. Just too much like Joker for my personal taste. But look, this is a show, like I said, that is not perfect, but one that I ultimately liked, and I think has me very excited for part 2. I think part 2 is going to crush. So that's all I got to say, which means it's time for a score. So let's get the old C-Maniacs up. There they are. Masters of the Universe Revelation Part 1. Phenomenal animation. Wonderful He-Man like Easter eggs. Like, the idea of him catching and throwing things is in here. And where it happens, you're just like, oh man, that's so He-Man. And as much as you have those Easter eggs and the things that feel like He-Man, I liked some of the twists and turns that we get in the show that allow us to see characters in different lights and give us some different beats for those characters. And ultimately, I think the story that they're telling is going to be an epic that is worthy of He-Man. But the approach to this first part, I didn't quite think worked perfectly, and I think there were things that you could have done to make it work perfectly, and for that, I think the show fails a little bit in this first part. But ultimately, story that I'm invested in, one that's befitting of He-Man, a voice cast that is befitting of all of these characters, and everything feels right. While the story might not have been exactly what we all wanted or hoped for, everything about the world of Eternia and the characters that are here are spot on the money. So for the C-Man, I'm going 3 out of 5 C-Maniacs. Not quite perfect. Definitely some issues and things that you could have tweaked easily to correct. But I have high hopes for part 2, and I'm very excited to see where we go. So 3 out of 5 C-Maniacs for the C-Man when it comes to Masters of the Universe Revelation. It certainly doesn't deserve the extreme hate it's getting, but I understand some of the issues that people have with the show, and I understand everything that people love about this show, because there is lots to enjoy here. So those are all my thoughts on Masters of the Universe Revelation. Now it's your turn. Have you watched this show? Did you grow up a He-Man fan? Are you someone like me who, maybe is more tied to Kevin Smith, so you got into He-Man so you could watch this show, or He-Man was something that was adjacent to the things that you did. You were aware of them, but having it come back, getting this kind of adult look, drew you in. What are you thinking? What worked and what didn't work? From whatever standpoint you're on. I want to know what diehard He-Man fans are thinking. I want to know what non-He-Man fans are thinking. I think this might be a little bit more accessible for non-He-Man fans. But like I said, I'm just interested to see where everybody is. So whatever you're thinking, from characters to story concepts, animation, good, bad, indifferent about Masters of the Universe Revelation, put it down below in the comments section. Look forward to talking to you down there. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up, and if you're new, you want to come hang out with the C-Man as we approach Part 2, see what else we've got in store with Masters of the Universe Revelation. You just like what I'm doing when I'm talking TV, movies, trailers. You just want to show a little love and support because you dig what the old Seaman's got going on. Well then, hey, come join Seamaniac Nation. I'll take the love that way. It's real easy to do. All you got to do is hit that subscribe button. Hit that little bell if you want those alerts. And until next time, for the Seaman's Cinema, sit down. I've been the Seaman. I'm signing off. Peace!
Oh, hey, what's going on? You must be sticking around because you're looking for more content featuring this guy. Well, guess what? You're in the right place. You can check out more videos right here and right here. And if you have and you want to come join that Seamaniac Nation, you can hit that subscribe right over there.